Hello everybody. Welcome to the second video in this Gunship tutorial series. In this video, we're going to be talking about how combat works in Gunship and going over the concepts of initiative, actions, attacking, and death saving throws. So rolling for initiative is usually the first step in any fight. Anytime that a character in a scene performs some sort of violent act, immediately after that, everybody involved makes an initiative check. So to do that, you would look on your character sheet under the skills, you would find your character's initiative bonus, make a d20 roll, add that bonus, and the result of those would be your initiative score. And characters are going to take turns acting during combat, and they act in the order of their initiative scores, from the highest one down to the next, all the way to the lowest. On a character's turn, they are able to perform 3 actions. One standard action, one move action, and one swift action. A standard action is nearly always going to be used to perform an attack. You would select a target and attack them. A move action is used for movement, so that can be changing your position on the map. A character can move 30 feet as a move action. Other examples of move actions would be opening a door, reloading a weapon, getting something out of your character's pocket or a handbag. All of those are move actions. Swift actions are a little bit more complicated and much faster than a move action. It's a very minor thing, like turning on a character's radio transceiver or changing the firing mode of a weapon. There's 1,000,001 different ways that you can use a swift action on your turn, and players at your table and your game master can help you learn more about that as you go on. Right now, all that you really need to focus on as far as your turn is knowing to move 30 feet and pick an enemy and attack. Move 30 feet and pick an enemy and attack. That's going to be what your turns look like 99% of the time when you're first getting started with the game. So how do you perform an attack? Well, you are going to pick a target. If you're using a ranged weapon, you need to have a line of sight to that target. If you're using a melee weapon, you would need to be next to that target, so adjacent to them. Once you've got your target picked out, you roll for the attack. So you would take a d20 roll, just like you're making a skill check, and add your attack modifier to that. Now, you can find the attack modifier in the same section as the weapon that your character is currently using there on your character sheet. So d20 roll plus attack modifier, you get a result. That result is going to be compared against the passive reflex defense of the target that you chose to attack. Now, if that's an NPC, the GM is going to know this number. So the way the exchange goes is you roll your attack, you say, I got a 26. Does that hit? And the GM would look at that character's passive reflex and say, yes, a 26 hits, or no, a 26 does not hit. This character has higher than a 26 passive reflex. So assuming that the attack scores a hit, you move on from the attack step to the damage step. During the damage step, you would look back at the same spot in your character sheet and you would see a damage value. It's going to be in the form of something like 3d8 plus 4. And all that stat block there means is that you're going to take 3d8, 3 8-sided dice, roll those, add them up, and then add 4 at the very end there. You would then say that number to the DM, say that I got like 15 damage, and they will then subtract 15 damage from that character's hit points. All characters have hit points. When your hit points hit 0, you are knocked unconscious. There's a couple of special things that can happen during the attack step, those being a natural 20 or a natural 1. When you're making an attack, if the number physically on the die ever says 20, that's considered a natural 20, and that scores a critical hit against the character you're attacking. So a critical hit hits automatically. You don't have to add anything up. Just natural 20 automatically hits. A critical hit also deals plus 2 dice of damage. So thinking about that same weapon that we had before, instead of dealing 3d8 plus 4, now you would roll 5d8 and add 4 to that result. A natural 1 is sort of the opposite of this situation. If you ever roll a natural 1, that's an automatic miss. No need to make a calculation. Even if the attack would have otherwise hit, natural 1 always misses. The attack doesn't work. Usually you just move on to the next person in initiative and keep going. Now, let's regroup a little bit here and look at an example of some of this stuff in action. So say that we've got our characters over here. We got Morgan, Olympia, Thomas, and Dex. They're hanging out here at a bar, and this shady sort of character starts walking in. None of the others have really noticed him yet, but Morgan's kind of eyeing this guy, and he notices, oh no, this guy has just taken out a gun. Morgan is going to run and dive for cover in response to that, but a character has performed an aggressive action. Nobody else really knows what's going on yet. Now it's time to roll for initiative. So I have just done that here. You can see with this little turn order that our bad guy has rolled the highest. He rolled a 20, so he's going to get to go first. So the first thing that he's going to do is he's going to use his move action to also take cover behind the bar right here. So he moves 10 feet in that direction. And then he's going to use his standard action to make an attack against Olympia. So he checks for line of sight there, makes his attack roll. He gets a 26, and Olympia's passive reflex is only 19, so a 26 will hit. Moves on to damage. His weapon deals 3d8 plus 4. He rolls a 15 on the damage, so we go over to Olympia's hit points, and we subtract 15 from those hit points. Now, this is unfortunately really bad, because all characters have something that's referred to as their damage threshold. Now, a damage threshold, you can think about it kind of as a limit of how much damage a character can take from a single attack before they start to face some pretty serious consequences from that. So if a character ever takes damage that is greater than their damage threshold, they move -2 steps on the condition track, and we'll get to that a little bit more in a second. They move -2 steps on the condition track and acquire wounds equal to half the damage they took. Now, Olympia only has a 13 for a damage threshold, so she's going to get wounded by this attack because it beat the threshold. So acquires 7 wounds, 15 damage to hit points, 7 wounds, and moves -2 steps on the condition track. Now, the condition track is sort of a representation of how ready to fight and how capable a character currently is. You start out at the normal condition, but if you're ever moved 1 step down the condition track, you take a -1 penalty on all attacks, to all 3 of your defenses, and also on all skill checks and ability checks. So it's pretty bad. It applies to everything. -1 step, you are at the -1 penalty. You move another step down, it's a -3 penalty to all those things. Another step down is -6. Another step down is -10. And if you are ever moved lower than -10, so the bottom of the condition track, you are knocked unconscious. So the 2 ways that a character can be knocked unconscious: run out of hit points, 0 hit points, or they get moved to the bottom of the condition track, either by being wounded, or there's some things that like move you steps on the condition track. Being intimidated would be an example of that. So yeah, there's one sort of special intersection there between a character's damage threshold and running out of hit points that you have to be aware of. So if you're ever reduced to 0 hit points by damage that is less than or equal to your damage threshold, you're fine. You get knocked unconscious. Because you were reduced to 0 hit points, you would acquire wounds equal to half the damage that you took. It's important to remember that. Reduced to 0 hit points, similar to being wounded, you get wounds in that situation. However, if you are ever reduced to 0 hit points by damage that is greater than your damage threshold, not only do you move -5 steps on the condition track and fall unconscious, same as normal. If it's by damage that's greater than your damage threshold, you are also dying when you get knocked unconscious. So when you start dying, so immediately at that time, you're going to make what's called a death saving throw, and then you will be forced to make an additional death saving throw each time that it's your turn until you become stable or otherwise die. When you make a death saving throw, it's sort of the opposite of the way that most of these checks have been going. You're just going to roll a d20 and look at the number on that d20. If the number is a 7 or lower, you're okay. But if the number is an 8 or higher, you acquire what's called a death point. Now, anytime that a character has 3 death points, that character is dead. They have died, they bled out on the ground, something similar. The GM can add flavor. That character is dead. The way that you avoid that, since obviously it's fairly likely that you're going to be getting 1 death point each round while you're on the ground dying, is you can have an ally move up next to you and use a standard action to stabilize you. So an ally can stabilize you from the outside, or if ever when you're making that death saving throw, the number that you rolled on the die is less than or equal to your Constitution modifier. So usually like a 1, 2, or a 3 if you've got a pretty good Constitution. If you roll really, really low on that death saving throw, you can sometimes automatically stabilize and no longer be dying. So that should be pretty much everything that you need to know in order to get through your first session in a Gunship campaign. To learn more about combat and all the rest of Gunship, be sure to check out the website for the game, gunshipsrd.com, as well as the other tutorials in this video.